You need to make sure that the machine is not going to harm you in any way, right?
Absolutely, because otherwise you never would buy that thing.
Absolutely.
So I need to bring trust in, because otherwise all my customers will not buy that stuff. There might be a total misconception in how to build functional, safe, robotarized, physical AI architectures. The first commandment for building robots in all form factors is trust. Now you can always look at, okay, how do I lift that over into a humanoid, into a drone, into a manufacturing arm?
Behind every dashboard, every ADAS feature, every HMI, every EV battery lies a human story. I'm Stéphane Lagrelle, founder of the Storytelling Tribe, and you are listening to Automotive Storytelling, a podcast where we uncover the narratives that drive automotive innovation. In an industry that is impacting the lives of so many people around the world, it's the power of storytelling that ultimately connects technology to humans. Okay, so at the AEK, as you can see behind me, and I'm together with Lars.
Hi, Stefan.
Lars, maybe you can introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm the CTO of NXP Semiconductors, and NXP is the former Philips Semiconductor, so one of the big European semiconductor makers.
Yeah, and we had a lot of semiconductors actually present here at this conference,
Absolutely.
which I think is kind of a trend, right? Because I believe that semiconductors were kind of tier 2 position before, right? It was like, okay, the OEM asking a silver box to a tier 1, and the tier 1 deciding which silicon vendor he would work with. But this is completely different now, right?
Since about 10 years, we are seeing, or 15 years maybe, we are seeing that this very strict and rigid value chain, as you described it, OEM to tier 1 to tier 2, and we consider us tier 2, that this is converting into a value network. Why? Yeah. Because it is super mission critical for the OEMs to get as early as possible the essential innovations. And a lot of the essential innovations, so going from mechanics into mechatronics into electrification, is of course driven by electronics, and the basis for that is semiconductors. So knowing what are the most advanced semiconductors that are coming your way is essential. So we have a value network, and everyone is out there for speed dating and saying, okay, which semiconductor maker, and then second order question, which tier 1 can help us being successful.
But I think this is also driven by the change of architecture, right? Because silicon is getting more and more important, because as we are moving from decentralized to centralized architecture, I guess that for OEMs, knowing which silicon vendors they're going to work with is more critical than ever, right?
So the overall trend you could describe as the robotarization of the car. Yeah. Or as we describe it even outside of automotive, we are going from this on-demand world where Lars has a mobile phone and orders a taxi or a pizza, into the world that anticipates and automates, as our marketing people would say it. And that basically means is that you have a lot of devices around you that try to anticipate what Stefan wants to do and automates this. So they take responsibility out of your hands and prepare. You're coming home, your house is climatized, your fridge is full. You need insulin via your insulin pump because you have diabetes. You get that just by measuring vital parameters and so on. In the car, of course, all this arrangement, where do you want to drive? So autonomous driving, but also in-cabin moves, and then all the rest,
Okay, so one thing that I wanted to talk about is one of the quotes you had yesterday in your keynote. The car is a brain on wheels, as humans are brains on shoes. And I thought this really, really nice. And I wanted to talk about this. So what do you mean actually by that?
So very honestly, that was a more or less defensive sentence in 2018. A journalist approached me and said, hey, Lars, how long will NXP still exist? And I was like, what? So we are 60% in automotive with our revenue. And then the journalist explained to me, NVIDIA is taking all of that silicon into one chip, into one big brain, and then no one needs you and your competition anymore. And I was like, oh, wow, there might be a total misconception in how to build functional, safe, robotarized, physical AI architectures. Yeah. So I said, a car is as much a brain on wheels as you, human, are a brain on shoes. So meaning there is an entire body in between. Yeah. And there is an architecture that is pretty sophisticated. I have real-time reaction systems in my spine. So if I stumble, I have reflexes. Let's say, Lars, straighten your legs, stabilize yourself. It has nothing to do with big AI, but with fast reaction time. I do not even know what I'm stumbling over, but I straighten my legs and I stabilize myself. Then I have my cerebellum. And that cerebellum is, again, a functional, safe, real-time system in the nerd language. And it says, okay, I take care of Stefan's heartbeat, body temperature, stability, stomach control, the entire body movements. And then only on top, you have a creative, non-real-time system that is your cerebrum, your creative brain. And you need all three for autonomous driving. You can perfectly drive with spine and cerebellum, following other cars and so on, until you have to stop behind the car. And then your creative brain has to find out what's my best exit strategy. So is this the end of a traffic jam? Then the exit strategy, take over and get going, is a very, very bad idea. If it is a parking car, waiting for 4 hours is almost equally bad. So you have these multi-layers, and these multi-layers hardly influence each other. So you can be distracted in your cerebrum, in your main brain, but your heart continues beating. So these type of multi-layer architectures, including the nervous system, and I can go on now for an hour in a lecture. But in a biological robot, which we are, there is a very different architecture than just everything into one big AI system and get going.
I see. And so there are a couple of things that I'd like to react on what you said. Number one, you have been talking about functional safety a lot. And during your keynote, you said that it was a critical aspect that we need to make sure we, as an industry, basically, we look at. And the second thing was, you talked about ADAS and you talked intelligent cockpit. And this morning there was this presentation from the person from Audi in China. And it was making the parallel between the different levels of automation, 0 to 5 essentially. And it was introducing kind of a similar scale on intelligent cockpit. And I think this is something that I've seen kind of as a trend in those 2 days, is how we are making parallels and how at the end of the day, from a compute perspective, kind of both will go together. And I would like to have your point of view on this.
So on the functional safety first. There is a very nice pitch by analysts out there. The analysts say to us semiconductor guys, Lars, be happy, because in the next 10 years, there will be 50 billion of these smart connected devices that realize the world, that anticipates and automates. Insulin pump, smart speaker, smart fridge, smart car. So very different form factors, but by and large, intelligent systems that take over responsibility. And I will only tolerate these systems next to me if these systems never create damage for me as an owner. So I have to trust these systems. And how I define trust in a nerd language is, again, I need to make sure that they never can break down and create damage for me, or that they never can be hacked and be turned against me. So for connected system. So crypto security against hacking, and functional safety against malfunction, or if the systems fail, they fail in a friendly way. So the car does not crash in a wall, but parks itself. So these type of ingredients are the main fundamental thing. Whether it's a stupid machine, a drilling machine that you have, you want to trust that this machine doesn't injure you, or it's an intelligent robot, trust is the first thing. Only when you have trust in place, you start thinking, hey, how can I automate that machine better? How can I shift more of my tasks into the machine? So more brain power, AI. And how can I make the machine more energy efficient to work without cables, or have it longer working, and so on. So the first commandment for building robots in all form factors is trust. And that is the key thing. And of course, for driving robots that can do real damage to the world around them, it's absolutely, they must have.
It reminds me a little bit the movie, with iRobot. You remember this movie, iRobot? But at the end of the day, it's a little bit like this, right? It's you need to make sure that the machine is not going to harm you in any way, right?
Absolutely, because otherwise you never would buy that thing.
Absolutely.
So I need to bring trust in, because otherwise all my customers will not buy that stuff. Simple thing. If you cannot trust your fridge, and your fridge could order 500 liters of milk for the next weekend, that would be commercial damage for you. You say, okay, forget it. It's not that important that this thing is autonomous. I go shopping myself. There's much more dramatic use cases, of course, and a rolling car.
But I see what you mean.
On the combination of your in-cabin and autonomous driving and so on, there is the automation, the technical ingredients are very similar, although the outcomes are totally different. You want to have a robot that senses its environment, connects to the cloud. So I want to drive from Stuttgart to Munich. Is the road free? Thinks of a smart advice and sends this to the powertrain and the steering wheel of the car. Sense, think, connect, act. Every of these devices, by the way, is built with sense, think, connect, act. In-cabin also has sense, think, connect, act. You sense who is in the cabin.
Yeah.
You try to get the data from the cloud, radio, music, whatsoever. You try to get the outside information or climate control information, voice control, and so on. So you sense and you connect. Then you think of a smart advice, which passenger in that cabin wants to do what, including the driver. And then you send this advice to the loudspeakers, the screens, and so on. So the sense, think, connect, act principle is each time the same for an intelligent system. Now, if you have a very big chip or a chip with multi-processing islands, in principle, you can say, okay, I put as much as possible of these topics together. And this is what some of the players are doing. There is no other big need for combining that, but it's the technical capabilities. But that is very different from what your rolling infrastructure is doing. So you have this rolling skateboard. There is where the OEMs are struggling most to bring basically the vehicle integration. Mm-hmm. So the driving dynamics, the powertrain, all of that. Because there you have to be super sure that this entire thing works really under highest trust conditions again. Then you have the ADAS, so the driver replacement island. But these two in real world have a very, very thin interface layer. If I replace you as a driver in a normal car, I have to turn the steering wheel and I have to press two pedals, gas and brake. That's it. So this is super, super simple interface. The driver has to work failure-free. The skateboard has to work failure-free. But they can be decompartmentalized. The same for the in-cabin management. And by the way, the in-cabin could also be a fridge if I try to transport cooled goods. Or it could be just a box for a postal officer. So you have these different worlds, and they have very, very different complexities in integration.
And so one thing that I've heard a lot, and quite frankly, I think it was the first time for me, it was chiplets.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, it was in most of the presentation I've seen, or at least most of the questions I've seen. What is your position on this? And what is for you how much of this notion is an evolution versus what we have today? So one quick thing before we continue. I'm Stéphane Lagrelle, founder of the Storytelling Tribe. After 25 years in global automotive marketing at companies like Harman, TomTom, and Pioneer, I built this business around one truth. The best technology doesn't always win. The best story does. We help Tier 1 suppliers and automotive tech companies build stories that put them on OEM shortlists long before the RFQ arrives. If that's your world, find me on LinkedIn. Now, back to it.
Let me first, maybe 2 sentences. What is a chiplet?
Yeah.
So a chiplet is the idea to have one chip, you know these little black squares, and you're putting different pieces of silicon into that. So you have a digital compute island, you have an analog I/O island, you have maybe a memory piece, and so on. So you put different chips in there, and you don't manufacture them as one big silicon piece because they are on different recipes.
Okay.
The digital transistors can be ultra, ultra small. Analog transistors have to be ultra, ultra precise. And the precision degrades by shrinking. So you have often very big transistors for battery cell management, voltage measurement.
Okay.
And for AI compute, you have super tiny transistors. Now, different recipes, different way of manufacturing that. So it's cheaper to take these fragments and to integrate them in on one PCB, or on a smaller PCB, or on a smaller and smaller, and you call it one chip. And you have different chiplets, mosaic pieces in there. We are doing this with most of our advanced products already today.
Okay.
Now, of course, the idea is, couldn't I take these mosaic pieces from different vendors? So I have someone who is good in AI accelerators. I have from NXP a big gateway for the car. And I have maybe from the third vendor another specialized chip. And I want to have that flexibility. Stefan needs a bigger memory. Lars needs a smaller memory. You don't need to redevelop the entire silicon piece, but you just exchange one mosaic piece, this memory.
So a chiplet could be made of different suppliers? That's the idea?
So at the moment, we, NXP, have these chiplets from NXP, so multi systems in a package, dice in a package, and that is, we are doing this since 10 years.
Okay.
So that is unexciting. It gets exciting, of course, and it gets more a value, business case, a value proposition type of thing. When you say, okay, how now if I take one from Infineon, one from ST, one from NXP, who is combining that? And could we have standardized interfaces between these blocks to make sure that the different vendors, that the chips from the different vendors can talk to each other?
And that's the reason why, Bosch, for instance, this morning was discussing about the chiplet in a way to reduce costs.
Yeah. So in principle, it is, of course, if you have such a chiplet integrator and you have from everyone a piece that has the same interfaces and the chips can talk to each other, you're taking a complete ECU and force it into a tiny module.
Okay.
And you can exchange there the pieces. And of course, now for cars, maybe even less important. But what we are doing with iMac, for example, Accelera and NXP, we are trying to shrink such an ECU to make it fit into a humanoid robot. Because I don't have the space in such a body to have big ECUs. In a car, it's still sort of okay. But the more you want to have, for example, a wrist built for a humanoid, you need to shrink the form factors and you need to have this flexibility. And there it becomes a commercially interesting.
So what is the driver then for chiplets? Is it because the industry needs to be more cost efficient? Is it because the technology allows it or forces it? Or is it because there is a demand from a given robots or stuff like this? So what is driving chiplets essentially?
There is multi-factors, and I see at the moment the business case for really only from a cost down perspective, I see that a little bit shaky because that's not exactly clear who has which benefit in that entire thing.
Okay.
What I see is as hard drivers is form factor reduction.
Okay.
And flexibility, because if I have to each time designing a chip, specifying it and so on takes you 2-3 years.
Okay.
If I each time need 18 to 36 months to get a new piece of silicon out, that, of course, is nasty. If I have a module where I just flip the memory block and I have it already on the shelf and I say small, medium, large memory, you can be ultra fast. And fast, little form factor, that is for me, I think, the next step in innovation.
Okay. My last question would be, and this is something that you close your keynote with, was how you guys see expanding your offer from automotive to other physical AI, let's say. And one of the, I would say, things that we have been hearing a lot during those 2 days is robots and humanoid robots eventually. I don't know why robots needs to look like humanoid, by the way, but it's probably
it will only be a niche market. But let me...
Anyway, so tell us a little bit about how you see the future of NXP.
So first thing is, everyone is super excited about humanoids because, of course, that's an interesting thing. That thing looks like me and does funny things.
Yeah.
No one of us would buy a humanoid robot to push a lawnmower.
No.
You will buy a lawn mowing robot. I mean, purpose built. So out of these 50 billion smart connected devices that the analysts claim we're going to have, 45 billion will be purpose made. Your smart fridge, your smart car. You will also not have a humanoid sitting in the driver's seat driving you. No, you will have an autonomous vehicle. So what I have here in my hand is a little drone control unit.
Okay.
And this drone control unit, so flying a drone autonomously, is exactly built, again, with sense, think, connect, act, safety, and security. So what we have is suddenly the learnings that we have from the big rolling robots. It's a totally different form factor. And all of that, these different islands that I just addressed, fit here into different partitions of this little chip that has the sign of my thumbnail. But in principle, you are shrinking all of these type of topics and press them into a smaller device. This chip also controls lawn mowing robots, for example. So much less complexity, of course, than in a self-driving car. You don't need airbag systems and infotainment and so on.
So are you saying that you are taking the same structure, so to speak, and
the
then
same architectures and the architecture blocks? And then I say, okay, Stefan, you as my customer, what do you want to build? An intelligent fridge or an intelligent car? I can help you scaling with the same architecture blocks. How do you do the sense, think, connect, act, safety, and security on your complexity level and on your energy budget? And then we go. And that is what NXP is doing. So the ECUs that I was holding up yesterday are basically prototypes for a central brain in the rolling skateboard. The zonal units in the rolling skateboard, the data pumping Ethernet devices in an SDD architecture. And now you can always look at, okay, how do I lift that over into a humanoid, into a drone, into a manufacturing arm at a conveyor belt? And you're only scaling on the complexity, but not on the architecture anymore. And that is the secret sauce for us semiconductor dudes to scale, because the fun only starts if you can sell more than 500 million of each of these chips. Otherwise, the investment doesn't make sense.
So 500 million. Wow.
And you can do this for a mobile phone over a Christmas business season. You have to do this for cars. I mean, the entire car market only has 90 million vehicles a year. So either you are in every vehicle, or it takes you a decade to sell 500 million chips.
Exactly.
So therefore, we need to have these building blocks, and we have to leverage from each other. If I'm in 50 billion smart connected devices, then the fun is, of course, very high and I can scale. Yeah?
Exactly.
But it's a game of semiconductors.
Lars, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
And it was an absolutely great time with you. Thank you, everybody. And please subscribe to Automotive Storytelling if you have not done yet. You're going to find this interview and many other interviews in a special episode about AEK 2026. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Automotive Storytelling. Dear listeners, if you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast, and share it with friends and colleagues who are passionate about the future of automotive technology. Remember that behind every dashboard and every feature lies a human story, and those are the stories we are committed to uncovering here. Until next time, I'm Stéphane Lagrelle from the Storytelling Tribe. Thanks for listening.